Right, hello, greetings. It's Dr. Thomas Daffern speaking. And, it's Lunacy, essentially. It's the Sunday of Lunacy, 2nd of August today. I've been celebrating as a Druid this time of year, as many other people. In English, it's sometimes called Lammas. It's the same festival. It's the very first sort of hint of autumn. We've had incredibly hot weather in France. It's just suddenly gone slightly more bearable and cool, thank God. And it's that slight sort of turning of the wheel of the year type feeling. I've been down to my local beauty spot here, on the little river called La Petite Creuse, in the department of La Creuse. I have a ravine that's very similar to the place I used to live in Wales, in the Banwy Valley. The Banwy River was my beautiful local river down the end of the garden, and it's where Taliesin used to hang out by tradition, the Bard of Britain. So I always resonated with that, tradition when I was living there. I wrote lots of poems sitting by my pool. Now I've got the same thing here in La Creuse in the middle of France, and it could be the same river, you said, and it's looking beautiful at the moment. Although the water level is quite low, but that means you can cross it, which is excellent news. So anyway, that's my Lunacy, part of my Lunacy celebrations. I've also just edited the Order of Bards, Wandering Poets, Bards and Druids newsletter, which I set up many years ago, and which focuses on peace issues, so it's the Order of Peace Poets. And I'm trying to get the Druids and Bards and Poets of the world to focus on their peace responsibilities. All Druids, all Bards, in my opinion, poets. We should be speaking out about peace. We historically always used to. The Druids were the mediators in the conflicts, we know from innumerable sources. And, where are they today? Why aren't they reigning in the warriors who are now using psychological warfare to rampage around the world? People like Steve Bannon and God knows, and the emir of, the leader of Saudi Arabia, the saber rattlers going on in the Republican Party around Trump, around Philip May, the husband of the late Prime Minister, who sells weapons. I mean, they're warriors too in their own way. They just provide the tools, the weapons. This has all got to stop. We need a totally different politics which prioritises peace, human needs, satisfaction, and love, and sustainability, and solving climate change. We can't go on with militarism as it is. And that's what the Druid message is, and should be loud and clear. I wish there were more of us, and more, peace bards. So if you resonate with that, please get involved. You don't have to be a Celt, you don't have to be from Britain, you don't have to be from Europe, you can be anywhere in the world, as long as you believe the pen is mightier than the sword, and have a commitment to use your artistic gifts, which may be in music, it may be in poetry, it may be in the arts. I've just discovered an amazing Scottish artist who's created this thing called the Library of the Future, which is a whole bunch of books they're putting aside for 100 years. Every year another book goes in the library, and they can't be read. It'll all be open in 2114, 100 years ago. 100 years from when it started. And so there are sealed books going into actually a place in Oslo, a library that's specially built. It'll be there 100 years from now, they'll all be open. What a brilliant idea. That's kind of creative art in operation. Now that woman is a genius. She's a contemporary Scottish artist. And I've written about her in my newsletter, which anyone that's interested, ask me, I can send it to you. So that's where I'm coming from, that, but I want to just say a few things today that might interest people. Just the thing about Lunacy, why is this festival time called Lunacy? Who's Lu? The word is from the old Indo-European English, Latin, etc. stock, meaning light. Lux, and Lu was the god of light. Another root gives us Lucifer, who's the bringer of light, who originally wasn't seen as a negative deity. Lucifer was seen as a the bringer of light. He was symbolised by the dawn and evening stars, and has his own iconography in pagan, Roman and Greek Hellenistic sources. And in the Aradia legends and so on of the rebirth of witchcraft, which had gone underground, Diana worship, Artemis worship, he was the consort of the god, right, of the goddess. Well, so Lu has a huge, long backstory as the god of light, and when the Romans turned up and invited themselves into Gaul and Britain, they amalgamated Lu with Apollo. They said this is the same deity, because he's the sun god, he's the god of healing, he was the god of prophecy and all this stuff. And he was an incredibly important god. He was a pan-Celtic god. You find temples, statues, texts and so on devoted to Lu, or Lugus as he was called in Gaul, or Llw in the Welsh tradition. You find him all over Europe. And you find cities and towns named after him. Now, the most important town near me is Lyon. Great, amazing, beautiful city, Lyon. If you haven't been there, it's to die for. Go to ancient Lyon. There's a temple of Gallo-Roman antiquities that is, unparalleled, really, because it was the capital of Gaul for many, many years, before Paris was more than a few mud huts. Lyon was the capital, and Luke was the deity after whom the city was named. And it had a long and deep and amazing history, which is all to be found in the museum. One of its claims to fame is that Roman emperors were based there. Claudius was born there, and he it was who enfranchised the Celts of Gaul and said they could be Roman citizens. And many senators came from Lyon and went and served in Rome. And the text in which Claudius wrote this is there, the original text. He had it made in bronze and stuck on the wall, and it was found by archaeologists. And Lyon's had a really interesting history in ever since, really, as an intellectual centre. Early Christianity took off there. Irenaeus was a great theologian who spoke there about theodicy and how there can be a good God in the face of all the evil of the world, He believed in the God of light. He saw Christ as the incarnation of this figure, the God of light. There is a saying in the Rosicrucians, Christus verus Luciferus, Christ is the true light bringer. So yes, for the Gauls, Christ was the incarnation of Lu, which is why many Gallic Druids and so on became Christian. They adopted that. And near me at Toussaint-Croix, there's a beautiful ancient church built on a temple to Lu. And they know this because they found built into the tower there is a stone with Lu engraved on it in some way. Archaeologists have verified this. So what was a Gallic Druid temple to Lu became a beautiful Christian church. And I've done I've spoken in there. And this is true all over Europe, in the Celtic realm, which stretched all the way from the Danube to Brittany, to Scotland, to Ireland, to Wales, to what was the whole of the British Isles, and and many cities, as I say. So the most important, as well as Lyon, is Carlisle and Leyden, but also London. Lugdunum it was called. London, a city I know and love well, and where I studied and taught at the university, and my PhD and degrees are all from there. My parents got married there, etc. And two of my daughters were born in London, so London is my other home. Well, it's the home of Luke, you see. It's now a great Christian, cosmopolitan, but ecumenical, spiritual centre of world religions and philosophies, and that's where I began my teaching career at higher education level. And I think it should remember Lu. So on this day, all my friends in London, wake up and get busy in the resistance against ignorance, because Lu is also the god of intellectuals, because intellect is the is the fiery essence within the human soul that thinks stuff through and won't tolerate stupidity and ignorance and evil. I don't know where everybody is. They seem to be all asleep. We're letting idiots like Trump and Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. These people are morons intellectually, and yet they're taking over, power strongholds, and think they're getting away with it. Well, no, they're not, because the intellectuals of the world are actually watching what's happening. But we need more. We need to collaborate more. The thing about Facebook, although I use it a lot and it's great, is it kind of parcels people into their own little realities. This is the point Chris Wiley made. Whereas I'm a public intellectual, Facebook isn't really an ideal medium because one is pigeonholed by the way the system works into, you only see likes from people that agree with you or that are in your team or whatever. Whereas what I have to say is for the whole world, actually. And we haven't yet got a system that is comprehensive and universalistic enough. And the media are all in the hands of particular cliques and interest groups and, political agendas and national agendas. So, if my broadcasts are going to be carried on, I don't know, Iranian TV or, Indian or Chinese or American, then it immediately puts me in a camp, so to speak. Whereas I'm trying to address universalistic issues from a holistic perspective. And I was interviewed on Indian TV when I was in Delhi, and I think the Indian media is quite good at giving a comprehensive overview. The BBC seems to have utterly lost the plot and is now just become an arm of the Tory government pursuing its propaganda Brexit, which is a fake event. Engineered and gerrymandered by, the essential destruction of democracy. That's my interpretation. I'll come back to that later. But I'm saying the forces of Lu, the forces of light, the forces of intellect, the forces of reason, because there's a huge analogy between reason and the inner light. The Quakers talk about it. That's what we have to marshal as resistance. Okay, so now I want to just move on a bit and say another thing that I'm busy with at the moment is I'm working on a new book, and I'm happy to share that with you, which I've been working on every day since I last spoke, and will be for, I think, some months to come, which is a new field of study, a new field of research I've been engaged in. And it's to do with religious mathematics. If you think of a Venn diagram of two overlapping circles, you know how Venn diagrams work. So you have the field of religious studies here, and you have the field of mathematics there. And they're both hugely interesting and important fields of study. I've always slightly, found it perplexing that in the secondary school curriculum, maths is given huge emphasis, and religious studies is given either none or very little. I think there's a moral, crisis about that, because by religious studies I mean ethics and philosophy as well. Now that is the qualitative reflection on reality that maths deals just with number, the reign of quantity, what René Guénon called the reign of quantity, which is vital and important. Yes, we can't live in a world without number, and a lot of our activity is about numbers, a lot of our work and economics and all that. But then there's so that's the how much type of questions. Then there's the why questions. Why is there anything? Not how much is there of something, but why is there anything? Those are also human questions. They're incredibly important. And why should I act in such a way? Why should I bother to vote? Why should I care about the fact that democracy has been hijacked? Why should I care that I let Dominic Cummings get away with disobeying an order of Parliament and then proroguing Parliament against the Constitution and then getting away with it? Why should I care that the Parliamentary Intelligence Report has shown that Russian oligarchs and billionaires are behind Dominic Cummings and the Johnson government? There's literally been a coup in the UK, and billionaires have taken power. Why should I care? Well, so what, Well, the kind of apathy and silence in the media, because the media is now being infiltrated by the placement of these oligarchs. So we're entering a very totalitarian 1984 type world where the party leader Johnson says everything's fine. Trust me. I never told a lie in politics. And yet this is diabolical because he's literally inverting reality as reason knows it to be. The mendacity of this man and his political career zigzagging. You just have to read Cameron to see what a cutthroat chap he is. And yet, so the current Johnson, it's all spin and pretense and fakery. And the same with the other Tories. I think a Tory minister got accused of rape yesterday. I haven't read the whole details, but they're a pretty nasty bunch, and they're getting worse. And now they're all awarding themselves House of Lordships, like peerages. I mean, come on, this is corruption, this is Stalinism, Stalinesque. I'm reading a biography of Stalin by Simon Sebag Montefiore, and it's chilling in its banal buffoonery. These people were buffoons. They were having orgies every night, getting riotously drunk, and they were responsible for the death of millions. That's what we got on our hands, and the people that are in hock to the Russian oligarchs are trying to take over my country. Well, no, not going to happen. Not on my watch. And I'm a priest of Lu, a priest of the Druid craft, and we won't let it happen. Sorry, you can get out of Britain as far as I'm concerned. If you are that scheming and devious, and you've tried to produce Brexit, which is going to destroy my country, then you need to leave town. That's where I'm coming from. And everyone in the media that's working as their toadies, likewise. How do we do that? How do we get rid of this evil? Well, it's very simple. It's called truth. That's a very old-fashioned concept, truth. It's gone out of style. But actually, and we have to get a law passed by Parliament. Parliamentarians have to tell the truth. It's that simple. I've also proposed constitutional reform, that the House of Lords should be transformed into a Senate of the Nations, like England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, etc., possibly Cornwall, discuss. And that would become the government of the UK. The House of Commons transformed into a government of England. It's not in any way a government of the whole United Kingdom. That is a shamble of pretense. It's the government of England. And let the English deal with what has to be done. But let the whole UK stay together with a new constitution written down and a government by the Senate of the Nations, and there would be the national cabinet chosen. Anyway, I've got a website, you can see it, ukconstitutionalreform.weebly.com, and that you can read the details. And if you've got any better ideas, AC Grayling says that we should do a parliamentary recall process in each Tory seat. Well, that's quite a lengthy business, but it's a good idea too. The Liberal Democrats are having an election for the leadership. Both are fine candidates. It's a very, very difficult choice, I want someone that will work with Keir Starmer and with the Greens and with the SNP and with Plaid Cymru to create a national progressive alliance to stand at the next election and defeat these Tory monsters. And I don't know, whichever of the most forward-thinking, open-minded and genuinely liberal, candidates has that, then that's the person. I think probably Layla Moran has more intellectual firepower in her, much as Ed Davey is, good man. I don't doubt that. But he does seem to have only one tune, which is like green, I've done wind turbines type of thing. He doesn't seem to have a subtlety of addressing all the huge problems affecting the country. And because he was a co-participant in the alliance with the Tories that created this whole nightmare and monster process, I think maybe it's time to move on to a visionary like Layla Moran, who is a Palestinian Christian, peace activist, is probably somewhat to the left of of Ed Davey, who's very much the kind of traditional man in suits type image. And you can say, oh yeah, but that's why we have to elect him as leader, because he'll win more votes. Well, I think what's important is that there should be an alliance at the next election, and that anyone with any decency is not going to vote Tory again. It's also rather chilling that the company that is in charge of Postal Balance in the UK for general elections is now owned privately by someone close to Dominic Cummings. I think his sister, I read. I mean, that's outrageous. That shouldn't be allowed. That's hijacking democracy. Things like that need to be monitored and prevented. And these sorts of things should be going to the UK Constitutional Court. If we had a proper opposition of genuine, deep opposition, not just Tories that trot along and accept the status quo of Brexit and Tory coup land. If we had actual opponents who were opposing this nightmare, they would be referring things to the Constitutional Court all the time. The UK Supreme Court it's called. And so anyway, so in this book, going back to the book I'm talking about, I'm working on mathematics and religious studies. So you've got the two Venn diagrams. In the middle is this whole grey area that's never been explored by either religious studies scholars or mathematicians. And I'm calling it Principia Religiosus Mathematica in honour of Newton's Principia Mathematica. And he ends his book by saying that all he's done in his book explain the mathematics of gravity. He can point to the laws that govern gravity, and this explains how the universe exists in the way it does, how the planets don't keep crashing into each other, why the moon doesn't fall on the earth, and so on. I've been to the manor at Woolsthorpe where Newton lived. It's an absolute must visit for anyone interested in history of philosophy, history of science, history of religions, because Newton was deeply religious as well. He was an esoteric Christian like me, very interested in Druidry, in fact. Friend of Reverend Stukely, who was one of the first Druid people to come out of the cupboard in the Enlightenment, who was an Anglican vicar and a Freemason and a Druid, who did the first ever detailed surveys of Avebury and Stonehenge, books which I have here. And Newton and Stukely were, Savills of the same calibre in their different fields. And Newton was very interested in religion, therefore. He had the view, which I share, that all religions come from one ultimate, primal, original religion, which is, you can call it what you want, paganism, ancient religion, primal religion, the ancient wisdom, and that then it's refracted, like the colours of the rainbow, by historical events, by cultural events, and by the minds of different prophetic seers and sages who come at different times and places geographically. The Quran says every tribe has its prophet. Muhammad knew this. He was humble enough to know that every tribe has its prophets. And what that means is people that can use their refractive spiritualized intellect to absorb the highest energies of divine consciousness and then retransmit them at a vibrational frequency that the people of that day and age can comprehend, in a language they can comprehend, using images, metaphors, similes and vocabulary that they can comprehend, in order to continue and advance the human race on the long and complex spiral of the journey to enlightenment, up the magic mountain, as Thomas Mann would have said. So and Newton, put all that into a little book and said that when we rediscover that primal religion and all practice it again, we will have peace on earth. That's why he was interested in Druidry. That's why I'm interested in Druidry. It's a window back onto that primal white light. But so are all the religions. And the idea is that, yes, by comparing, contrasting, analysing and enacting and actualising the potential enlightenment seeds within all the faiths, then we can collectively reactivate the enlightenment of the planet as a whole. There was a lovely event yesterday, again at Lunarset, 1st of August, for the cosmic pulse of coherence. People connected with the Institute of Heart Math, and their research director, who worked there for 15 years, came and stayed here, and we did some research together. Worked on my love journal, which I publish. It's the only love journal in the world, for God's sake, the only academic journal on the nature of love. And what they've discovered is the heart region has this kind of energy that can be trained and enter a phase of coherence, which can create auspicious states of consciousness and well-being. And the experience we all feel when we fall in love, that's a highly charged, amazing experience. And if you haven't had it, I do recommend it. When you fall in love, there's that sort of co-harmonization between two hearts, entering a sort of coherence, a dual coherence, which is a beautiful experience. But we, humanity, can do that collectively. That's what they're saying. And, some of the questions haven't been worked out yet, and some of the intellectual work needs to be done on this. I personally am very suspicious of heartists that are anti-intellectual. I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think the heart should declare war on the mind. As a representative of the intellectual forum of the world, I think the heart and the intellect are needed together to work out our problems. And there is an intellect in the heart, as there is a heart in the mind. And, we need to work through this. Jointly. We need the thinkers and the feelers to work together, not sort of jostling for who's the best. So anyway, the book on maths and religion is very interesting, absorbing a lot of intellectual energy of mine at the moment, and pursuing questions about number and quantity and what is number, what is the concept of oneness, how is it different from the concept of two-ness. Where do these numbers arise? Who first invented them? There's one theorist of mathematics, a philosopher of maths, who reckons that number and counting began in the form of religious rituals, because some very ancient rituals, like in the Vedic period, are extremely complicated mathematically. You have to do certain measurements and placements, and if you're burning a fire, you have to align it in certain bricks and all placed specifically. And so you need to be a good mathematician to do rituals. And so there is a theory that counting began in prehistoric Paleolithic Eurasia and the Americas with religious rituals. So I'm exploring those kind of areas to do with the anthropology of religion and the mathematics of religions. It's very interesting. I'll give you updates as I come near to finishing it. That's still a way off, unfortunately. The other thing I want to say is that the purpose of doing it is for peace, because too many scientists and mathematical types are very disdainful and rude about religions, and vice versa. There's a communication difficulty between the scientists and the religionists, if you want, on the planet. And I'm offering this book as a kind of mediatory tool, which could be accessed by all scientists who love mathematics, but also all religious people who love God and prayer and meditation and the heart and the spirit. And what I'm saying is we need to get some advanced thinkers together to do both and to see where the crossing overs are. And that is what intellect does. I mean, the brain has these two hemispheres, and where they cross over, that's where thinking happens. That's where you join stuff up. And the word intellect means to interconnect things, to interconnect words, concepts, ideas, lexus, lexicon. It all comes from the same root. And the inter is the interjoining. So that's my peace offering for humanity, because we've been suffering from enormous battles and wars going on for far too long. As different religions battle for hegemony and supremacy, or different scientific theories. Marxism was a scientific theory which was, pretty ferocious on the battlefield, and pretty ferocious on the Civil War battlefield of suppressing its own dissent first in the civil wars after the Bolshevik Revolution. And it justified all this by appealing to science, so-called. And then it spread to China, and Mao has done the same. His tyranny over the Tibetans, simple little meditational people he had great contempt for, was because he was the great scientist, dialectical materialism, communist science. That was the justification for the mass murder, rape and pillage of Tibet. And so science is being misused by people in this imperialistic way. The British Empire justified a lot of its things. Even slavery was based on pseudo-scientific theories. And, if you watch, do some Googling and you'll see there's documentaries about how slavery was justified right up until actually modern times, and racism was justified on pseudo-anthropological scientific grounds, that the whites were superior, just, you can prove it. And that was the basis of Hitler's racism and his attempt to create this sort of super race. But it's all bogus. It was all mathematically, scientifically false. But science, there's a problem with science, which is sociological, because it invents an incredibly complex jargon for itself in every branch of it. The people that control access to that jargon at any one time are the knowledge keepers of that citadel of science, right? And therefore they deny entry to anyone that doesn't even speak the jargon. That's kind of how they keep you out. And so if they're doing despicable things in their citadels, and they're doing things like Nazi scientists were experimenting on people in Auschwitz, and Mengele was getting accolades for this, under Verschuer, who was the academic director of Mengele. Well, these people were giving each other prizes as great scientists, and nobody was able to, stop them, because they didn't know the jargon, they didn't understand the language, because Verschuer people were very clever, and they got themselves into this position of elite power in the sociological hierarchy of the Nazi movement, whereby they were unquestioned. So of course nobody stops Mengele going in and torturing people, to watch their reactions. Well, that's the danger of science when it's unchecked. And I think that there's as I've said before, the COVID thing that we're all suffering from is where that ends up. What we have with COVID is very, very specialised bioweapons research, gain-of-function research, highly sophisticated, porting down type stuff, fiddling with viruses to make them more and more dangerous, and suddenly it's leaked. And this is what we have. My intuition and my reason both tell me that this is too virulent and its effects too pernicious to be a purely natural mutation. I just don't believe. You see, nature isn't this evil. Nature isn't this horrid. Nature, produces illnesses and people get sick and die, but it never does this kind of mass wiping out of a pandemic with no recourse to any kind of medical responses. Nature is not designed by God, to use the Islamic terminology and Christian terminology, to be a minefield of persecution and horrors. I've been writing another book at the moment also on being and knowledge. I'm carrying on with that work. My next volume is coming along nicely, and I'm looking at the moment at Islamic botany based on the writings of Nicholas of Damascus, who was a great scientist and a philosopher and a polymath, a Stoic. He was a friend and teacher of Herod the Great, right? He also knew Augustus and wrote a biography of Augustus. Nicholas of Damascus came from Damascus. He was a typical Hellenistic Roman, polymath like Strabo and Pliny the Elder and so on. And he wrote a botanical book called De Plantis, on the plants, which is a masterpiece. And it was produced, it survived incredibly. And it was translated into Arabic during the time of Baghdad and the great scientific luminaries